In order to talk about the weaknesses of low sense and high sense, especially when it comes to peeking, first we need to talk about how and what like a good peek looks like. So one main factor about peeking that I teach in my coaching sessions is you never want your crosshair to be really in the wall for very long. So step number one is I'm preparing to peek this first angle. This means that my crosshair is away from the wall where I think that they're going to roughly peek. The next step is getting to a position where I'm ready to peek the angle. And now what do? We pre-aim into the wall and then we use our movement to move into the angle. Notice how when I used my movement, I didn't move my crosshair when I did the peek.
Two. Can we go back?
Now, you don't need to be perfect for this. You just want to be isolating that angle. And the most important thing after you peek is being able to be reactive. It's what I like to call the reactive stage. And after this, you want to be able to shoot them. So that's where you do all your adjustments. So again, to recap, make sure your crosshair is away from the wall. When you're ready to peek, pre-aim and step. It should be as simple as that. The mistakes I'm about to show can be found on all types of sensitivities, but this is typically what I notice from players who have keen weaknesses from being on the extreme ranges of high and low. I'll then talk about more general peeking mistakes that I notice from players, which are completely irrelevant to sensitivity, but are still easily fixed. Let's talk about players with lower sensitivities, especially players who play on 0.1 or kind of below this at 1600 DPI. The range doesn't really matter that much, but this is just as an example. The symptom I see the most when looking at players who have like very low sensitivities in their crosshair is that they are constantly moving their crosshair while they are peeking. Just to give you an example of what that might look like, and to exaggerate it a little bit, it might look like this. So one more time. The reason why this is bad is because when you start doing this, you are mentally ahead of your crosshair. So you might ask, what does mentally ahead of your crosshair mean? It means that while you're supposed to be peeking here, maybe your eyes and your brain is actually here. So you go to peek this angle, but there's a player here, but then you flick away because you're mentally already on the next angle. You see this a lot in players who have low sensitivities because they feel like they have to compensate for the lack of speed in their crosshair. This concept is similar to players who play on very high sensitivities. Again, this is just an example. I would never recommend a player who goes above about 0.2, but as just an example. So when a player has a very high sensitivity, even though they might peek correctly, what you might see is because they have quite a high sensitivity, is they will actually try to adjust to the angle because they feel like they need to be reactive. And if their crosshair placement is bad as they peek, they may feel more comfortable trying to adjust for their bad crosshair placement. The reason why this is bad is because imagine if we peek into this angle and there is a player here in this off angle, but our crosshair placement is bad. So for example, I peek very low to the ground. Any player who adjusts their crosshair after peeking is going to struggle a lot, because imagine a player is in this off angle and you go to peek, but your crosshair placement is too low. So you see that and adjust. But after that, you recognize, oh, I'm in the reactive phase. I need to actually peek this player. You're already dead because you're making two movements. Versus a player who peeks and just shoots when they see a target on their screen. Another thing I've noticed, particularly in players with lower sensitivities, or honestly just generally from players who struggle with their wrist tension management, is they pick up the mouse too frequently to reset it. You may know quite quickly if you have this issue or not, because players like this tend to have lots of arm and wrist pain after playing for long sessions. Picking up your mouse and resetting it is a really bad habit if you're doing it too frequently, because whenever you pick up your mouse, you're basically saying, I can't aim right now, I'm not ready to fight you. When tracing angles, this can be particularly bad since you'll never actually be ready for someone to peek you.